I think as you put it, there are people who are out to burn this book, right? And as you pointed out, not very liberal of them to burn this book. I think we have a satanic verse on our hands. But the title is a curious one. When I was going
I disagree. It's not a satanic verse because it's critical of the BJP's outlook on certain issues. It's a very, I think if people were to give it a chance, and I'm glad that it's on the bestseller list, but if the other side were to embrace it, they would come away perhaps feeling a little more reassured, but they also might find that they may not have a plank to oppose Modi going into 2024. So this book sort of answers that fundamental question, are we becoming a Hindu Rashtra under Modi? As the left says, that it's the last chance to stop him.
Someone I highly regard puts it very beautifully. They say that the only way you can, evolve is when you confront discomfort, right? But talking about the title of the book, I see that you have very intentionally used the words India and Bharat in stark contrast. What does those two words mean? And if you were to address this nation, what would you address it as Bharat or India?
Look, I think India that is Bharat, Bharat that is India, I think the Constitution makes it quite clear, Article 1. They're interchangeable. So I'm not going to get into that debate. I think it's a rather facile debate. I think it's more of a political debate. Ascribing names and labels has become a pastime, a political pastime. So who you don't like, you ascribe a certain set of denominations to. Who you want to sort of co-opt, you ascribe and assign a certain number of words to, etc., or labels to. So forget that. The book is, yes, interesting because, you see, a lot of people don't quite represent the name of the India Alliance accurately. It has no dots, actually. That is, again, a way that the BJP has sort of chosen to try and suggest that it is only the Indi Alliance or India bloc. But it's not quite that. The name actually doesn't have, if you look at when the India bloc was formed, they don't have an I.N.D.I.A, right? So this actually does stand for their alliance. Therefore, Modi and India. So it's a double entendre. The word Bharat actually, the book was written, was commissioned last year in November. We always intended it to be Bharat because that's the idea, the civilizational idea that we wanted to capture. I think that, as someone has just reviewed this book for the Open magazine, has said that there is a possibility for a modern India to coexist with the civilizational Bharat, right? And that's what this book sort of tries to suggest. Therefore, the battle for the soul of Bharat, that's what 2024 is about. So the title of the book is all encompassing. There is a double entendre. The idea is to sort of draw people in. And since it was written and actually completed by June, we'd already homed in on Bharat before it became really a talking point in the media, or before, the Prime Minister was described as a Prime Minister of Bharat and then became a big debating point during the G20 around then. So this title was already there, and it so captures the zeitgeist that we were quite surprised. Okay. Yeah.
So in your book, you mention, and you write it beautifully, that there was a Marxist plot to take the Hindu out of India. What do you mean by that?
The Indian.
The Indian, my bad.
So look, fundamentally, I believe that this is quite true of some friends of mine. A very intelligent person who's written an autobiography very recently and put it out. He was a CEO for a top company and now has written his memoir. He was at a party, he recalls this instance, and he was in, what people say is the Latvian circuit, right? And he started talking about Bharatiya Sabhyata. And people said to him, have you turned a fundu? Have you become a fundamentalist, a Hindu fundamentalist? And he was sort of taken aback because that moniker doesn't describe him at all, okay? So the fundamental point is that over a period of time, a number of stratagems were used to suggest a lot of things about our Hindu civilization. There was an attempt to sort of chip away at it. Of course, the British were past masters at it because they had to justify why they were here. They were here to colonize us because our culture was not so evolved. Now, what was our culture? Our culture essentially was a Hindu culture. And the Marxists continued this project in different ways. And that also translated into policy, actually. Fundamentally, many people say that discriminatory policies have been passed by this government. Actually, if you really look at it, the greatest political and legislative interventions that were ever done, which were discriminatory, were under previous dispensations that call themselves the flag bearers of liberalism in this country. And I can list 8 or 9 of them for you. They were quite significant, actually. I asked this question once. Someone asked me, oh, but this government has also done this, that, the other. And I said, name me one which discriminates against one particular set of people, right? The CA, some people say. And there was one, people talk about a act that was brought in Gujarat. But that was also under a Congress regime, but then modified a little bit, that made buying properties in Gujarat in certain areas a no-no. So you could say that was an exclusivist, policy. Now the CA is fundamentally not exclusivist. And we argue that, and we also quote a top advisor to the government, a legal advisor, who actually believes that it is exclusivist. So that is also in the book. But the CA isn't because, it's funny, we forget our history, and since we're in the East, Gopinath Bordoloi Sahab, a letter was written to him by Nehruji. And he said, look, we must allow for our Hindu brothers fleeing at that time East Pakistan, must give them. And we must identify the Muslim refugees who are also coming in and make sure that there is a very clear distinction between our Hindu brothers who are fleeing persecution in eastern Pakistan and also the Muslim refugees who are coming. So fundamentally that idea was already there, right? The notion of a CAA, a select bunch of people being brought in, you created a particular grouping, right? And that has existed even in America. You've had the Lautenberg Amendments, you've had the Specter, laws, you've had a lot of these laws which exist. They're not violative of the basic structure. In fact, Muslims are constantly still getting citizenship that are fleeing, persecution in different parts of the country. This is only to create a classification to expedite someone's citizenship, that's all. It didn't mean rejecting Muslims from getting citizenship. So basically, I'm just trying to tell you that a whole stream of interventions were brought in to try and suggest that, our Hinduness is discriminatory inherently when it's not actually.
Correct. Beautifully put. Now, so we are running short of time right now. Before I open it up to, some of the Q&A session that the audience wants to ask you a few questions, I will, before I go to that, I have one last question, right? And this is a ritual for me every year during Foresight. Every single time I conduct one of these, I have to ask one question, which is, bothers me, it bugs me on an individual Odia level, right?
Odia level.
Yes. As an Odia, this really genuinely ticks me, right? So I remember in 2019, we were hit with a little cyclone called Fani, right? Okay. And
I didn't pronounce it right.
Yeah, so some people call it Fani, some people call it Fani.
I did a McAdams, you mean?
Yes.
Is that
No, I'm almost there. So I remember, is there a journalistic guideline that most journalists follow in media houses? There must be some journalistic guideline, right?
Yeah, of course.
Right? Yeah. So कहीं पे ऐसा लिखा हुआ है कि जब साइक्लोन ओडिशा को हिट करे तो ओडिशा को कवरेज ही नहीं देंगे, ऐसा कहीं पे लिखा हुआ है? on any of the guidelines?
Guilty as charged.
Yeah.
I think that...
Because I'll stop you there, because I have all the headlines that evening, the day we were hit with funny. I will read them out to you, right? NDTV, the big fight, road to 2019, Times Now, Muskuraiye aap Lucknow mein hai, Mirror Now, interview with Arvind Kejriwal, India Today, Congress versus aap, News 18, quiz show on politics followed by an election debate, Z News, a documentary on Hitler. आज तक ने तो हद ही कर दी. उन्होंने लिखा है a gully boy style rap for 2019 election. In the end, the newscaster smiles at the camera and says, आज के समाचार में इतना ही. So, ओडिशा ने क्या बिगाड़ा है कि आप कवरेज ही नहीं देते हमें?
No, I think it's a very valid question, and as I said, guilty as charged. Though I have to say one thing here. Funny claimed quite a few lives, if I'm not mistaken. I think almost 80 people died. So that was a terrible tragedy, and I think it was the second worst by the way of quantifying it, devastating storm monetarily to have hit Odisha, and there wasn't coverage on that day. Now, jogging my memory back, and this is not an excuse in any which way, I think the authorities here in Odisha did a very good job, actually, of containing what could have been an even greater tragedy. So the success that Odisha has sort of demonstrated over the years might have made editors like myself complacent. Not an excuse, but it is actually a great thing. I remember coming here, since you asked me, in 1999, I was a reporter with the Times of India, and we were covering the aftermath of another one of those devastating cyclones that hit Odisha, and hundreds and thousands of people died, actually. Since then, Odisha has, I think, been one of the exemplars of how actually to insulate population from the effects of cyclones such as, and typhoons such as Fani. So that did happen. But we did come to the story on that particular night. Why we didn't come to it, and it's 2019 or something like that.
2019.
Yeah, it's been a while. But yes, I think the mainstream media is very obsessed with, Mumbai and Delhi and politics and business. And there are lots of issues that don't get play. I mean, there are issues with regards to a lot of social problems, your environment. A lot of that doesn't get played. Luckily now, we're moving away from this sort of TRP-driven obsession. Because why? Because we have digital platforms where you can actually put out stuff. So we've begun to stratify our coverage. So fine, people come to TV to watch, the biggest political story or what have you. And there you can then, on digital, start putting out. And of course, a lot of that has also happened because viewers have been moving away to people such as yourself and others who are giving them perhaps news that is more relevant to them.
Yeah.
So
I'll just wrap it up now, Rahul. But before we do, I want you to pledge 4 lines. Okay, can you put your hand up here?
Right.
Like this, okay? And repeat
I
after
won't
me.
do that.
No, not that
that's
one.
Dangerous.
Today on this platform,
I,
Rahul Shivshankar,
Rahul Shivshankar,
pledge to report about Odisha every time a cyclone hits.
Pledge to
report about
Odisha
every time a cyclone hits. Thank you.
Perfect.
Guys, give it up for Rahul.